So welcome everyone. Hope everyone had a great summer. First class is always very exciting and all the other classes are just horrible. No, actually it gets much more exciting as we go. So first of all, just make sure you're in the right place. There's sometimes one or two students after the midterm when they realize this is not a marketing class. So tax 3300, make sure you're properly registered. The burden is on you. You know, sometimes students register late and they don't see themselves, they assume everything was processed correctly. Just play it safe. You know, it's a good way to live life in general, and certainly in this particular situation. So I'm Professor Melnick. My office is on the 11th floor, room 278. And you see my contact information. We'll talk about office hours and few other administrative type of matters a little bit later. I want to make sure, because I see people still flooding in and there's going to be more people coming in, so I want to make sure everybody hears it. We'll have some interesting stuff to talk about, okay? But for now, I'd like to say that today's class, first of all, I hope you realize that this is a double section, right? So we are not meeting like most of the 4-credit courses twice a week. This is one-time deal, which has its sweetness and bitterness in the same time, right? The sweetness part, you just have to show up once a week. In fact, with this course, most of the time you will not even have to show up. Your life is getting so much easier, you have no idea. In fact, it's gotten even easier with the latest changes in laws for you. So we'll talk about that too. So I could tell you, you're the luckiest bunch I've had so far, because over the years, and I've been teaching for a couple of decades, you guys are gonna have it all set up in the best and the easiest way than any other class before. And you'll see what I mean as we go. Okay, so what I'll do today, my goal for today's class, and again, each class, whether it's online or offline, and we'll talk about the breakdown little later as we go through, is a double section. So the great thing about it is that it's only once a week, or if it's online, it really doesn't matter. You could watch it, listen to it to the extent comfortable for you. But you know, the other side of it is when we have a live section and live class on campus, it's longer than normal class, okay? So with that in mind, we'll also talk about later on, as more students come in, the structure of the class itself, because you know, I give a lot of flexibility and I'll let you guys decide how you guys would like it. But again, I want to make sure that we have as many students as possible for this, although you know, the room is pretty full and it's always great to see these 200, 300, 400 people being in the class. Okay, so first part of the class will be purely administrative, which is really full class. And you may say, well, why spend so much time on housekeeping? Well, if you get it down, if you understand the structure of the course, the expectation, how things are gonna go, and all the related matters, this is a major portion of what it takes to do well in the class, okay? So today, I would say, is the most important class out of all the other classes that will follow. So I strongly recommend that you take detailed notes, although as I say it, I'm laughing myself because part of the plan, even this class, I may end up posting it on Blackboard, so you may rewatch it. Especially some of my jokes that you didn't get in class, you could rewatch it and you'll get it later. No, I'm kidding. If you don't get it first time, probably you're not going to get it next time because they're not funny. Okay, so with that, and the second part of the class, we're going to get into substance. I know a lot of you just can't wait to start talking about taxes, but we're going to save that towards second half or maybe last third of the class, depending how things go. Does that sound good so far? All right. So, the book. I just stopped by the bookstore, and as always, they ran out of books. So I know many of you bought them already. As every year, they're always apologizing to me, and every year I tell them this makes no sense. You can't do the same thing over and over again. But I think they don't want to overstock and be stuck with them. So they keep playing it safe and playing silly when talking to us from the faculty perspective. In any case, I know it's a big book. I know it's expensive. I have nothing to do with the book. I didn't write it. It's a better book in terms of what's available in the marketplace. If you want to save some money, I know at least last year, I'm pretty sure this year too, electronic versions are available too. Once the publisher that didn't even send me the latest version of the book, which is really funny, I ended up downloading it from their site this time. But I could tell you, if I remember correctly, you could also purchase only certain chapters. Is that true? Nobody looked into it yet? So, if they still make this available, this option available, you don't have to buy everything in the same time. If they give you this a la carte option, you could buy up to chapter 13 for now, and then I'll let you know, okay? Because I know this is, money is significant topic, and few of you emailed to me and I responded. So this is just quick answer. Now, in terms of volume, quite often I get these two, and I even put it in the outline, which has been posted a while ago. Did you guys see the outline on Blackboard? Beautiful, excellent, that was the idea. So I even put it in highlighted, bolded text that you cannot use prior year version, okay? And even though I put it there, even though I'm saying it now, I have no doubt somebody will come to me at the end of the class or next class and say, can I use prior year version? So the answer is no. And the answer is no, not because I want you to pay money to those publishing companies, but because laws always change, first of all. Homework problems change, but also, especially this year, I've been teaching this, as I said, for 2 decades, since I was 15. And there has never been such significant change in tax laws as happened this year. So you could imagine how mad I am, right? Because for the most part, there are many significant elements of what I teach you guys that basically brand new, okay? And I wrote a letter to Mr. Trump about it. Although your life became much easier because for the first time in all the years, although each administration talks about how complicated the tax code is and how it has to be simplified, and each time every president tries to do something which only makes it more complex without really making big difference, this is really the first time when the tax code was really simplified. Okay, and I'll show you and you'll see exactly what I mean and why I'm saying it. Which is a good thing, because there's less things to study for you and there are less mistakes to be made on exams. So, so that's going to be interesting. Okay, and we'll have less to talk about. I'll have to fill in more and more not so funny jokes into the curriculum. All right, so that's as far as the book goes. Now, sometimes I get asked the question, Professor, what's the best way to prepare for the exam and to do well? So there are a few things that come into play. And again, I'd like to repeat, the things I talk about now are the most important things that you will hear out of the entire course. And if you get them down now, you're going to be so much better off. So please pay attention, take notes, okay? So what can you do? Well, number one is, to the extent we have live lecture, you got to be here, take careful notes. Number two, students been asking, first of all, over many, many years, can we just have like one double class, Friday, so we don't have to come twice. We accommodated it, and it worked beautifully. Students loved it. And then about 5, 7, 8 years later, students started asking, can we have this class version online? So maybe, we don't have to come every time. We don't want to, we did a lot of polls. Whenever, I changed the course structure, I always, start with the students just to see, what the real needs are and what the interests are and how we could accommodate it. So it's interesting because while a lot of students wanted online class, they did not want simply online 100% because they still wanted some direct in-person interaction, which makes sense to me. Just for Q&A and maybe some homework discussions and some things I didn't quite understand. So we structured it exactly that way. Most of the classes, I hope, will be online, and I will give you notice every single thing. When is the class? What is the homework? What's happening will be on Blackboard. So please make sure. There's a lot of you here, over 300. Don't email me, okay? Because it takes me a while to get back to everybody, and certainly if there's a question, there's no way for me to write essays to 300 people. All the information is on Blackboard, okay? So you just gotta go on Blackboard and look carefully. I might have posted an announcement, and then after that I posted 2 other announcements, and somebody goes in, looks at the latest one, oh, I don't see it. Well, just go back, okay? So everything will be there, and I will make an announcement way in advance whether next class will be online class, which students love, or on-campus class, which students love even more. Now, here's what I've noticed. We did it for the first time last semester, where I offered and I put up lectures online. So students absolutely loved it. It was very flexible. They don't have to come on campus most of the time. It saves you a lot of time. Most of you don't have any other classes today, right? So, and most of you have at least an hour to get here. So that saves you between 2 to 3 hours altogether. Just that alone. Plus, the beautiful thing is you don't have to get out of bed to watch the video, right? And whatever jokes you do like, you could just keep repeating them the whole day. Now, what I discovered, and this is just human element there, the problem is, when we have a regular class, you come, you expose, you have to sit, you're marked attendance and everything else, and you're exposed to the information. But when it's out there, oh, I'll listen later. I'll watch this video later. And later becomes much later, to the point where it's too late. So my advice to you, once again, if you want to do well in this course, it's up to you. I don't take things personally. I'm here to do everything I can to facilitate your learning experience, to make it as enjoyable as possible, to teach you, to show you perspectives, and to give you much more, as you've probably heard, than you are expecting now. But you don't want it, that's up to you. Then you're wasting your time and money. So with that in mind, I will generally post videos for the week as if it's the class. So usually they'll become available on Friday around 11, 10 o'clock or whatever, right? My strong recommendation, watch it as if you are in class, as if you had to get up, get dressed, and come to class. Make it your schedule, okay? Because I've seen students who mess themselves up by just delaying it and bunching them up, and then they come to classes where we discuss homework. They have no clue what the conversation is about because they never were exposed to lecture. And I'm not going to re-lecture to individual the entire 2-3 hours worth of topic. There's no way to do it with 300, 400 students, right? So, treat it as a blessing. You don't have to travel to school, but make sure Friday, 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock, whenever you wake up, you watch the video. Does that make sense? So, or at least within a day or two later. I mean, I understand, but why would you want to do it on the weekend, So please make sure you do that, and I'll post homework problems also. And make sure you do that. Homework will be submitted before each class. So again, I'm going to run it as if it's a live class, whether it's online or offline. And I will put down homework due on or before 11 a.m. Friday, this date, okay? And you'll just email it to me. So it's easy. We'll save some trees along the way. I'll post email address where to send everything to. Do not, please, send your homework to my regular email address. I've created dedicated email account, and I'll post this on the Blackboard, okay? So you could submit your homework problems. And when it comes to homework problems, I do not return them. But what we do, we're going to have a class that's dedicated to homework, okay, after a few sessions. So you could call it a recitation session or whatever you want. You come in, I will be here, and I'm going to go through every single homework that I assigned. Does that make sense? So whatever questions you have, I'm going to answer them, and this is how you get feedback as far as the homework goes, okay? While we are at it, I just want to say, in terms of performance, following the theme of what it takes to do well and so on and so forth. So there's generally 2 exams in the course. And this is also in your outline that has been posted before you came here. So there's midterm and there is final. Each one weighted the same way, 45%. And I assign the remaining 10% for project, which I'll talk about later on, not worth it, but it's a lot of fun. It's a review of the entire material. We're going to pretend that this is congressional session, and we'll talk about things. Also, homework goes part into that equation, and that's the main factor there. Now, as far as exams, historically, I made them a combination of true, false, multiple choice. I used to give problems and essays. That was many, many years ago, and I realized that a lot of times students got not so satisfactory grades just not because they didn't know the subject, because they really can't write well, which is sad, disappointing, but at the same time, I didn't feel it would be fair for me to assign grade for tax scores based on the writing. So I switched back to true, false, multiple choice. I don't expect it to change. And generally, exam, midterm, final has not been cumulative to the extent that I don't test the same topics. But, of course, the nature of the material is such that it builds on top of the other. So you really have to know everything, but I don't test specifically topics that we already went through during the midterm. Does that make sense? Okay. So what else in terms of basic housekeeping? For those of you who feel, I tend not to assign a lot of homework. I don't believe repetition adds any value. But I don't know, once a year out of 600-800 students, I will have a student or 2 who said, "Can I do more homework?" Sure. So you could do whatever homework you want that I don't assign, and you could come to me when we have recitation and I'll discuss solutions with you. Historically, in terms of preparing for the exam, publishers online had sample questions to practice. Good idea. I do recommend it. But at the end of the day, the single most important element in terms of what it takes to do well in an exam is really getting down the lecture. Whatever I talk about and whatever I talk about most, you could take it as a hint that this is going to be tested more in the exam, okay? So understanding the lecture, and to the extent you don't understand something, when we have office hours, we'll discuss them, we'll vote, whatever you guys prefer. Again, I'll come back to it towards the end of the class. Please remind me in case I get too excited and forget. We could have a discussion about office hours. But make sure as we go through, and certainly as you listen to the lecture online, if you have questions, write them down. And the next time there is a session, make sure you come to me, because if you don't understand something, it's just going to make it more difficult for you to understand the next topic. And then if you're going to wait for a week of the midterm, it's going to be too late, because there is no way I could give you the necessary time with this size of the class. Size being huge, it always worked beautifully. Students love the class, love the setup, as you I'm sure know. So it's always worked very, very nicely, okay? What else from housekeeping perspective? To the extent we have a live class, on-campus class, a couple of things I'd like to mention. Number one, please make sure that you're here on time, okay? Why, in case it's not obvious? Number one is besides obvious reasons, at the beginning I make very important announcements. Okay, you don't want to miss them. Number two, I kind of lay out what's going to be covered, how, what are we doing, so you'll have a better clarity as we go through the material. Number three, just to be respectful to the rest of the class, and it's certainly disturbing to the lecture itself. If somebody habitually late, it's okay to be late. It happens to everybody. It's okay to be late a little bit. It's okay to be late a lot. But if I see somebody who's late a lot often, I will decrease the grade. Okay, and this it's stated so on the outline. It's just it's abuse situation if somebody just regularly. Now you are registered for the course, so you gotta be here. Once in a blue moon, I have somebody coming in and say, I just can't be here for the whole class because I have a job. Well, you have to make a decision. What's more important to you at a certain time, but you cannot get a credit for the course which you did not attend in full. Okay. Speaking of which. And again, your life became much easier because most of the course will be online. Nevertheless, please keep in mind, when there is a live lecture, I definitely take attendance. And if you miss one class, it's really you missed 2 classes, right? And altogether, you're allowed to miss 4 classes before Dean's office will kick you out from the course. So please keep that in mind too, okay? Now, when we have live lecture, when it comes to food and drinks, very important topic, okay? Big item in my mind. So drinks are okay, as long as they're non-alcoholic. We have enough fun here. But food, if you come very hungry, I will ask you very much, please sit in the back, eat quickly, and please don't sit up front or somewhere and make these noises, because I'm very food sensitive. So if I see food, my brain kind of collapses, and all I could think about is like, how can I run in, take a bite, and run out so nobody notices. But I'm very serious. I love food, as you'll find out more and more from my talks, maybe. So please enjoy it responsibly. Okay, let's see what else on the basic level. On the outline, in the back of the outline, you have topics and classes. As it says there, it's very tentative. I don't have a goal of covering certain topic by certain date. That's not what this is all about for me. I want to make sure you understand the material. So generally, I'll pace out the course. We'll cover what needs to be covered, but we may not cover all the topics. And this brings me all the topics listed in the outline. But this brings me to a very important point. Please pay attention. We will not cover everything in each chapter. In fact, in many chapters, most of the material will not be covered. Why? First of all, well, the reason is that the book that we have, the chapters, they're really written for about 4 or 5 courses. This is basic federal income tax course, as I'll explain to you what it really means. But the bottom line here is you're not here to become tax expert necessarily, okay? So it's introduction to a system, and I'll use sample topics which I believe are best to that point, and some fundamental topics that you really need to know in this life because you're going to deal with them one way or another. Okay? So what this also means, it means that please don't come to me asking me the question, Professor, you didn't talk about this, are we responsible for this? And this brings me to the next point. So I will only test what I teach, period. So if there is something that I did not discuss, whether in class or when we talk about homework, okay, you're not responsible for it. Is that clear? So save yourself time and effort. I do want you to read the entire chapter. okay? And I always assign reading and homework ahead of the class. Why? Because you guys need a whip. Because unless I assign homework in advance, you're not going to read the chapter. I know this, because I've been a student before also. So by reading the chapter in advance, and to make sure you read, I assign homework in advance, you're going to be much better prepared to understand the material that I'm going to lecture about. Does that make sense? But in the same time, I will not lecture everything in the chapter, so whatever I don't talk about, you are not responsible for. Are we clear on this? Okay, beautiful. So let's see what else from the basic items. I do not assign the date of final exam. That's usually done by the registrar office, but it has always been last Friday before the last day of classes. Okay? With midterm, I will give you at least a week notice. Okay? Most likely more. I put a tentative date of the midterm on the outline, but I will confirm it again at least a week, if not 2 weeks before. There is no makeup for the exam, so please make sure you're here to take the exam. And once we get close to the exam time, we'll talk about it more. Needless to say, your beepers, phones, cell phones should be off or on vibrate, so we don't all start dancing all of a sudden. Although some of those are really good. All right, now about the course itself, I already mentioned that this is going to be basic introductory course. Okay? This is not a seminar where I'm going to train you how to fill out tax forms. Okay? If some of you are interested in that, you shouldn't be here. You could just go to, I don't know, one of the H&R Block courses, a couple of weeks, and they'll show you how the form looks, how to fill it out, and all that stuff. This is not what this course is all about. This course is about understanding how the system works. And first and foremost, what you'll realize very quickly, that this course is very different from all of your other courses with an accounting topic, because this is about law, because tax is law, okay, to be clear. In fact, it's one of the most complicated areas of law. It's so complicated that tax attorneys, statistically speaking, on average, make much more than any other attorney in the country. Okay? Why? Because it has always been very complicated, and you understand what I mean as we go through the discussion. Okay? So please understand that, number one, because it's law, interesting things happen. Most of the time, there may not be clear black and white answer. Is it taxable? Is it deductible? Quite often the answer is going to be, well, it depends. It depends on facts and circumstances. And to accounting major type of personality, okay, and I could talk about it because I also at some point was accounting major personality. I'm still recovering. But we are used to debits, credit, net, zero, done, right? There's no such thing in many cases in the law world. And at first, it kind of sets back maybe certain type of people because, so which one? Like, we need certainty. That's why we went to accounting. We need to know. But after a while, you get to really appreciate it because there is no certainty, because the answer is, it depends, okay? This creates a lot of opportunity for creative minds to argue, to build certain scenarios where something would or would not be taxable, deductible. So there's much more room for creativity within the borders, right? And we'll talk about those borders, right? Because at some point, people who get too creative cross the line where it becomes now criminal, right? And we don't want to be that creative. And we'll talk about this entire interplay, which is quite enjoyable, okay? Now, Another thing, just for the sake of clarity, and we'll dig into it much deeper, but you already realize that there are different types of taxes out there, right? So this course is specifically about one narrow type of tax, and that is federal income tax, right? Meaning tax imposed by federal government. And not just by federal government, but also imposed by federal government on whom? Individuals versus what? Corporations, partnerships, and state. So I just want you to understand where we are in this tunnel. Okay, there are many other types of taxes, and those who are curious, and statistically, huge chunk of you after this course will apply and register for our Masters in Tax courses. Okay, in program, just 1 year to get Masters in Tax, and this is where you will be exposed to all these other types of taxes. Okay, but our mission here is narrow, but this is the biggest, this is the most important, this is the most expensive type of tax. So that's a good thing. Obviously, as I go through, to the extent you have questions, please raise your hand. Don't yell out, because not everybody feels comfortable yelling, and I want to give every opportunity to every student to participate. And to the extent we have live courses, I do note participation credits and discussion of homework points, and it all goes towards your 10%. Okay? So the other thing I want to mention as a part of big picture, the nature of law is such that for every law there quite often, and certainly in tax law, there's a lot of exceptions. And you'll understand why, because it's really very political type of situation here, okay? And you'll understand why. And then for many exceptions, there are other exceptions, right? So when somebody's asking you a question, or tax expert question, there's usually this qualifier that comes before the answer, and that is, well, generally, right? You know, this is taxable, this is deductible, but there could be exceptions depending on the situation. So I'll give you a little hint. Whenever in doubt, if you're asked the question, and it's certainly true in this class too, if you don't know the answer will probably be what? It depends. Now don't over abuse it, because it's not always true. And one thing I could tell you right now, because I know somebody already playing the odds most of the time, so I could get C by answering the question in the exam. It depends. There's no such option in the exam. All right? What else do I want to say? There's usually, out of a whole bunch of you, maybe 3, 4, 2, 5 students who have some background in taxation. You volunteered for VITA, your uncle has a tax practice and been slaving you around for the past few tax seasons and all the other good stuff. So I'd like to warn those of you, because statistically, historically, those people who come with some tax background do not do well on this class. Okay, and it sounds very counterintuitive, right? Why is that? Because these students feel they know all this stuff and they don't have to really take notes and do the homework. But then these little things make all the big difference. And they come shocked, say, oh, I can't believe I made these silly mistakes. Okay? So I'd like to prevent that. That's why I'm talking about it now. I'm very much into prevention. So my suggestion, just do the work that everybody does. Listen to lectures on time, do the homework, and you'll be great. Now, for 99.9% of you who have no clue what the word tax even means, I just want to tell you, by the time we come to the first exam, everybody's going to be on the same page. Everybody's going to be on the same level. You're going to know as much as anybody who ever practiced for 20 years what you need to know for the exam. Okay? So that's, these are some of the key points overall. Now, interesting thing, I just want to mention this. Maybe I'll mention this in a minute. Let's see. Any questions on things I did not discuss yet? And when it comes to housekeeping, I tried to be very thorough. While you're thinking, I'm going to see if there's anything else I wanted to say. No? No questions? Everything crystal clear? Okay, so one of the additional benefits that you get by getting enrolled into my section is you'll have an opportunity. I'll be very happy to answer your questions that have nothing to do with the class. Specifically, when it comes to your career, you know, a lot of you don't have too many people to talk to. You know, certain areas, I've done a lot of different things in my life. So to the extent, you know, you want some opinion, I'll be happy to help you out. And to that point, students generally ask me to say a few words about my background so you could see what you may or may not find helpful. Should I do that? Okay. So first of all, I actually graduated from Baruch College myself a couple of years ago. And I was accounting major, as I said before. And when I graduated, I went to public accounting world, and I was at that time at the largest firm, whatever that was at that time. My clients were, so I started in audit, as a matter of fact. My clients were financial markets clients, so some of the world's largest broker-dealers, banks, commodity trading firms, and so on and so forth. And then I did some work in regulatory compliance consulting area. I passed CPA exam, I became a CPA. Then these guys, I helped them build this compliance consulting practice, which traditionally law firms did. So, but in return, I told them they should pay for my law school. So while they've never done it before, they actually created executive degree. You know how these companies have executive degree programs in Columbia Business School and other stuff? I didn't want to go to business school. I wanted to get law degree. So they created a program for me. I've never done it before or after for anybody. So I actually went to law school. It was pretty sweet because they paid for my law degree. They paid for my salary as if I was working. I didn't work summers. I didn't work Fridays. It was pretty cool stuff. Of course, later I quit and I had to give them all the money back because we had a contract. I had to stay with them for 3 years. But that's a separate story altogether. So I am an attorney also. And then after law school, I went back to law school and I received a postdoctorate degree in taxation, LLM in tax. So to become tax attorney, there are a few ways you could do it. You could go get master's degree, master's postdoctorate degree through law school, or we have lawyers coming in for our master's degree here, and you get master's degree and become tax attorney that way. Anyway, so I did that. I spent some time working in courts with judges. What else did I do? I spent some time in real estate world and real estate investments. Some of you noticed, emailed me. I wrote a book, became #1 bestseller in multiple categories. Also about taxes. I have a few more books coming out, maybe this term actually. If they will, I'll talk about them. I'm a president of a National Bar Association, run a few nonprofits. Been advisor to the United States Treasury Department, help them write laws. I'm actually on the executive committee. You know the entity that regulates you guys, all the CPAs? No? Or at least contributes to that. It's called AICPA. Have you heard of that? American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. So there's executive committee that deals with financial planning, personal financial planning, and I'm on the executive committee there. And we work with the government administrations when there are changes in laws. We Actually, right now we're working on licensing matters and so on and so forth. So that's all fun stuff. I've been doing radio, television for a while, and whenever they need an expert, NBC, CNBC, Bloomberg, Forbes, all that stuff, you may see my name there. I'm tenured professor here, and I'm a director of graduate and undergraduate tax offerings here. And I deal with recruiters all the time when it comes to interviewing and other stuff matters. And sometimes I did it last semester. I don't know if I'll do it this semester, but sometimes I'll dedicate part of the class just to teach you how to be more successful in getting interviews you want to get and to get the offers you want to get. There's a lot of common mistakes that most students make. So I spent some time in New York Stock Exchange and so on and so forth. I think that's enough, okay? So to the extent any of this sounds interesting, I talk all over the world. I don't know if you know. In different occasions, I was a keynote speaker in World Blockchain event in Germany and in Singapore, and I'm supposed to be in Dubai in October in the World Artificial Intelligence Summit, and I talk about generally share my experience and my teaching on how to be more successful personally and professionally. That's one of my passions. So with that in mind, I could talk on and on, but I think that's enough. But this brings me to a very important point. While I am a CPA, while I am an attorney, this situation is not where you could just come to me and start asking me legal questions and look at me as a free attorney or a CPA. In fact, before this class started, I already had somebody come up to me with a technical question. So there's a policy that we have within the department. We do not give any legal or technical advice, period, okay? Why? Because the college cannot be responsible for it, okay? So please, I understand it's very enticing, and sometimes, aunts and uncles and parents will send you with questions because, it's better to ask professor than pay an attorney and all that other stuff. But I cannot answer those questions. I will answer things that I teach in class and about the topic, okay, and general stuff, but there's not going to be specific. Having said that, to the extent you do have problems in life, and because of the background and because of my work with different professionals, and I forgot to tell you, I also served as a chairman of continuing education at the University of New York for financial planners, CPAs, and tax people. So, so you guys keep licensing, and I've been doing it for about 8 years. So I may recommend somebody, generally not in tax world, but other areas, whatever, your life, legal and stuff. If you need a good recommendation, I'll be happy to help that way. All right, before we jump into substance, any questions on housekeeping, structure of the course, or anything else? Yes. So you have no idea how lucky you are. Did you guys hear his question? The question is there any review of the material covered before the exam? Was that your question? Yes. I have great news for you. Would you like to hear great news? Yes. And you know how? On demand. At 2 o'clock in the morning, as you're in bed and you want to have a review, you just click a button. Because all the lectures are going to be online. And you can review as much as you want. Okay? And you could fast forward any topic, whatever you want. Okay, so having said that, generally before the exam, we'll cover homework, and we'll go through some material as well. Okay? In a condensed form, obviously. Any other questions? That's what I just said. Generally, before the exam, I'll have a class. We'll go through the topics that will be in the exam in condensed format. Okay? Any other questions? So this was never available before when there was no recordings. Now you have entire course. Put it in 5 times the speed, whatever topic you want to review, and then slow down. It's YouTube-based videos. And then you could slow down. It's awesome. Students, I'll have to be honest with you. I did a session review before the exam, and I announced it, and out of 300 people, 4 people showed up. Okay? And those people who just, whatever, separate conversation. Okay? Because it's all there, and you could just fast forward and go with the speed and slow down and re-listen. So life became much more easier when it comes to review, you know? People just don't want to travel for 3 hours a day to hear something that they could quickly go through the videos, you know? Which makes sense to me, and I did not take it personally. Okay. All right, so before we get into substance, I think it's enough time for everybody to show up. So there are a couple of items that I want to get your opinion on. So first, as far as office hours, you see the office hours on the outline, but historically always students came to me and said, Professor Melnick, you know, once we have a class, live class, or even before that, the actual class, it's so much easier if you could just spend time right after the class so we don't have to separately come. And it's especially true for this class where 99.999% of you don't have any other classes today. So instead of coming in a separate day for office hours to ask questions, if you could do that same day. So, and also, since we have a lot of time budget, most of the time, and if you guys will want to, I could finish the class earlier when we do have live class. And basically, this is going to be classes time, because I know a lot of you have jobs. And, you know, the schedule is wild. So I try to make sure I'm here to answer your questions at the time in the way that works best for you. So, question for you, would you like me, instead of coming in separate days to see me, for me to run office hours right after the class, and most of the time I'll finish the class 20 minutes, 25 minutes early, 30 minutes earlier, so you could come and ask questions. Those of you who would like that option better, please raise your hand. Yeah, so as always, this is basically, you know, if not the entire class, 99.9. So instead of those class hours, it cannot be both. So instead of those hours, it will be right after the class when we have live session. Now, the other thing when it comes to the format of the class, so when we do have a live class, it's supposed to run from 11:10 to 2:40 or something like this, right? So I could give you 2-3 breaks, or we could take one break, and I generally do that around 1 o'clock or so. We'll take 5-7 minute break. We resume, and I'll let you out about, you know, 2:20 to 2:15, somewhere there, maybe even earlier. Does that sound good? Those of you who would like that and get out early and start the weekend earlier, please raise your hand. Yeah. So easy, right? So that's what I was waiting for everybody to be here. So that's the new situation. So we'll have Q&A office hours after the live classes. Okay, please save that. And I'll be happy to answer any and every question you have. And, and we'll take a break around 1 o'clock. All right, beautiful. So since there are no other questions when it comes to the format of the class, then we just, yes? So it's very sophisticated. It takes a long time to explain, but here's how I take it. Somebody asks this question that serves as a reminder for me to do it. And then I go out, I give pieces of paper, and people put their names there. Serious stuff. So thank you for raising the question. You're welcome. Just make sure it's legible. And as far as, sometimes I get a question, Professor, how do you take attendance when we are online watching the class? Is that an interesting question? Yes or no? Okay, so we are actually watching you because we are logged into your camera, and because when you click on Blackboard and you accept the terms and conditions, one of them is that we could watch you. So make sure you're dressed well. I would leave it at that, but there's a risk somebody will run to Dean's office and say, Professor Melnick said you guys are watching us. So this was a joke. We have other ways of making sure. I'll leave it at that. Okay. Any other questions? No other questions? Okay, we lost one person after this general conversation. Oh, we didn't lose you. Okay, good. All right, excellent. So that means so far so good. All right, so we're going to start with chapter 1. And then we'll talk a little bit about chapter 3. You all read chapter 1, right? And chapter 3 for today? So I have good news for you. Those of you who did not read chapter 1, which is 99.999% of you, you don't have to read it. I'm going to go through it, but there are a few points that I really want to bring to your attention as a matter of background. So if you take careful notes, you'll be as good. But what I do want to, now, while at it, since I'm feeling generous today, mostly because I'm high in caffeine, which I normally don't drink, but for my lectures I get a nice English breakfast. You don't have to read, in fact, don't read chapter 2 either. It's a research type of chapter. We don't need this. What I do want you to do is to read chapter 3. That's really where the real meat of the course starts. Sounds good? And again, the bookstore, those of you who are looking for hard copy, said to me that because it's Labor Day weekend and all the other stuff, they expect the shipment on Wednesday or so, maybe Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever. But you could get it online, an electronic copy. Oh, and sometimes I get questions also through the email. Do we need some electronic key, some CD, because publishers have all these bells and whistles. You don't need anything else, just the chapters. Okay, you don't need all those upsell items that they give you. Okay? All right. Yes?
Sorry. The homework that you assigned, is it going to be like problems in the back of each chapter?
Yes. The question was, the homework that I assign, will it come from problems at the end of each chapter? The answer was yes. But what I tend to do, as I said already, I tend to make you read in advance, and I'll assign chapters from topics we did not discuss yet, because I want to make sure you read. Now, you may sit and think, how is it fair that you assign homework on topics that we didn't even study yet, right? Who said things have to be fair? Life in general is very not fair. So if you haven't learned that, this is a good opportunity to learn that. And the second reason, as I said, this forces you to read in advance, which is really what I want. Because it's different world. Law is different world. And if you read in advance, I don't expect you to understand, but you're going to be much better prepared to process the information I gave you. I'm going to lecture as if you did not read, as you will see. But you're going to be much better off if you do. Okay. So, are we ready? This is very exciting to me. I'm not sure if it's exciting because I teach or because I'm over-caffeinated. But regardless. So, taxes. You know, the beautiful thing about taxes, there's so many expressions about taxes and sayings about taxes. Anybody can recall any of them or a few of them? Yes. Beautiful. What's your name? Dmitry. Did you hear what Dmitry said? There are only two things, in case you didn't know. There are only two things that are certain in life. One is death, and the other one is taxes. Because no matter what you do in your life, you work, you don't work, you live, or you even die, as you will learn, you still have to deal with tax matters. So we might as well learn it, don't you think so? If it's so important. And I'll tell you another reason why you want to learn it. Okay? Anyone interested in making money here? Please raise your hand. Okay, please lower your hand. Those not interested in making money, please raise your hand. Good, because I was going to say please leave, because you don't belong in the business school. That's right. You better be interested in making money if you're in the business school. I don't care what your incentive is. You want to run a nonprofit? I have news for you. To run a nonprofit, you need first and foremost what? Passion? No. Calling? No. Mercy? No. You need what? Money. It's all beautiful as long as somebody making money. I had a meeting with a top guy from insurance industry yesterday. Sweet guy, flew in from Colorado, and he talked about his daughters, and his daughters are into this save the world type of situation, you know, and they don't know anything about the money, they don't care, you know, they're like this and that, and said, beautiful, as long as there's daddy to make money, they could do whatever they want, right? You need money. You need money. There's no question about it. And you'll hear me say it maybe in different places, different occasions, but whoever tells you also that money doesn't make you happy, never had the money, real money. That's also wrong story, okay? Why? Well, it's very simple, because if you have money, you could make a lot of people very happy. You could save lives, you could make people healthier, because good health costs money. You could create opportunities for people, okay? Money could make you enormously happy by helping others, okay? And helping yourself. But is it possible to have a lot of money and be miserable? Yeah, because your brain is screwed up. You know, that's just how it is. Happiness has nothing to do with money. Happiness has to do with how you manage your brain. So this is a whole different talk, and sometimes I talk about it. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I try not to talk about it. But yeah, it's like a car. Is it good to have a car? Can it get you to places faster? Not get wet under the rain? Is it good? Yeah, absolutely. But if you don't know how to drive the car, what good is it? Same with money. You know, car could make you very happy if you use it well. Okay? So since money is important, one thing you'll quickly learn, anyone working here, please raise your hand who already works. So those of you who already work got exposed to one of the biggest horror movies of your lifetime, right? Because you go out, you work, and then you get a check, and you look at it with a big smile like, where's my money? Well, guess where your money is? Your money is gone. Major chunk of your money is with the government now. Welcome to the world of taxation. So one of the things you'll learn, and what got me excited about taxes many, many years ago, as I said, I was accountant, I was auditor, and I love that too. This was a lot of fun. You know, as an auditor, you don't really have to, I don't know if you realize it. You guys know the profession of auditing, right? Most of you are studying that. But the beautiful thing, what most people don't realize, you don't have to know anything at all. And that's what I loved about auditing. I just went to companies, you just see what they're doing, and then check if they're doing it right. Use some reasonable approaches there. And if you don't know what they're doing, they'll explain it to you even. It's a beautiful life. And then as you get more senior, you take people to restaurants, lunches. It's beautiful. Then I had my private jet. We flew to audit companies in Cayman Islands. Don't ask me why, but the beach was beautiful. So it's all good. But then I realized, wait a second, what are all these departments and all these major companies dealing with taxes? And it's an interesting thing because, you know, as you make money, you realize, oh my goodness, you know, there's major chunk goes to the government, and there is a way actually to plan to minimize what you're paying. And what got me as I started studying tax law after college, my college experience was a little bit, what's the light way to put it? Detrimental, let's say, to my interest in tax law. I absolutely hated the course. And I hated the course when I took it because the course was structured around the forms. Here's where you put this amount. Here's where you put this amount. This is the form. This is what's taxable. And it was boring tremendously to me. It was not interesting. It was very mechanical. And that's why I hated the course. I did terrible, by the way, in this class. It's my secret to you. But it took me years to realize what tax is really all about. And what tax is really all about, it has nothing to do with forms. That's just the last small part. It's all about planning. That's really the real creative opportunities are. This is where you could make a lot of money. This is for the planning. This is where you could make millions of dollars helping clients versus filling out the forms. Go pay $50 or some more. Okay? So another thing that I realized after I started really studying taxes, every page I turned, in my head it was like, ka-ching, the cash register running. Because I saw, oh my God, I didn't know I could save money on this. I didn't know this is not taxable. I didn't know. In fact, what you realize very quickly as we go through the course, that tax is really an alternative form of investment. It sounds really weird right now. Okay? But you'll see what I mean. You could make more money in tax planning in terms of planning how you transact things and therefore paying less taxes, and you could even hope to get on stock market or whatever it is. You could make return on your investment 10%, but then if you structure your dealings and your transactions and you're paying 0 taxes as opposed to, let's say, 40%, that's much more important, much more valuable. And I'll teach you during this course ways how you could make a lot of money and pay very little or even no taxes. How to make hundreds of thousands of dollars and pay no taxes. That most people don't know about. For that I'll have to charge extra, but no, maybe not. Okay? So it's huge. It's huge. It's not simply some esoteric. You're going to deal with it no matter what. There are a lot of courses that you take that you'll never ever deal in your life with. Okay? Some of my biggest nightmare courses that I was stressing out most in my life, I never touched them in my life no matter what I do. With taxes, you're going to deal with them, I guarantee it to you. And another reason why it's so important, because if you mess it up, and a lot of people do, you're going to deal with the government. And you're going to learn very quickly that if you do something wrong with taxes, you know what happens, right? You could actually go to prison. After these news came out of the former advisors or whatever it is for Trump, and my wife read an article and she said, oh my God, up to 80 years in prison for tax fraud? It's worse than killing a person. That's right. Guess why it's penalized so heavily to tax fraud? Guess why? Anybody wants to take a stab? To get the mafia bosses. Those guys are not mafia bosses.
You could set an example for the rest of the...
Why? But why? Set example, yeah, but why? What is it all about? Why tax is so important, so penalized? You lie on your tax return, you go to prison. And maybe even for longer than killing somebody. Why? What? It's a revenue for government. Yeah, we're getting very close. Government cannot exist without money. It's practical. Government cannot exist without money. So they better be strict because they're going to be out of business. Which brings me to the real conversation. Why do we need taxes? Why does the government have taxes altogether? Why? Why? Well, we just kind of mentioned it, right? To pay for its expenses. Anybody wants to guess what the original cause and the original need and the original reason for government to raise taxes? To start collecting taxes? Anybody? Yes. War! To fight wars. Okay, this was hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And guess what? It hasn't changed yet. Because still the biggest budget item And the biggest expenditure is what? Still military expenditures. Why hasn't it changed? Because humans didn't change. Humans don't change. If they have an opportunity to grab something, they will. So you got to be either grabbing or defending from being grabbed. That's all. You understand? So what can somebody give me other examples of expenditures that the government has? Infrastructure. What does that mean? It's like that term widget. I went through the college. I'm an immigrant. I came from Eastern Europe. I was sitting in your chairs when I just came here. Oh, actually, we didn't have that building at that time, with a dictionary, like some of you, not speaking a word of English. And there's one word that I went through college 4 years, that especially in accounting classes, everybody used, that I didn't know for years what it meant, like widgets. What is widget? So it's like infrastructure. Like, what does that mean? So give me examples. Roads, building bridges. What else? Social welfare. That's interesting. That's not infrastructure, but you're right. That's another example. So the government, and this actually brings a next point. So besides all these different expenditures, because the government needs money to pay for different expenses, the government also uses taxes for different purposes, not just to raise money. Like what we just heard, welfare program. What is welfare program? Welfare program is transferring wealth between those who have more to those who have less. That's all it is, right? And so we tax people who make more money, and we pay to people who don't. And we give them either in the form of money, which is welfare, or medical insurance, which is Medicaid, right? Or housing, right? So that's another reason, interesting reason why and how the government uses tax rules, okay? Edward, our videographer, sitting there, finally he sat down, stopped moving around, because he's like sniper with me. I just can't sit still for a while. So, okay. Any other ways the government uses money? Yes, sir.
Paying political figures?
Paying political figures. Now, what does that mean? Just be more specific, because it sounds scary at its face. You mean paying salaries? Yeah, you're right. So, mayor has to get paid, president has to get paid, interns have to get paid, right? Absolutely. What else? How else? Bureaucracy. Again, mayor has to get paid. No. What are examples of bureaucracies?
Like the DMV.
Department of Motor Vehicles. Exactly. Okay. Different structures, institutions, government institutions. So that's example of another type of expenditure. Okay. But instead of giving me more example of expenditures, because they're endless, right? Can you think about other ways and reasons government uses taxes? So we talked about raising money to pay expenses. We talked about redistribution of wealth, right? How else? Anybody? Yes. Funding education, right? To get people more educated. So it's type of expenditure, but there is a higher reason for that. Very true. Yes.
They fund other countries.
Yeah. International politics, right? To support countries we like, right? Boycott countries we don't like so much. Very good. Anything else? Any? Yes?
Yeah, I think
Research. Yeah. Another type of expenditure, but with the idea of improving what we know, what we have.
And in a more general term, creating jobs, and this looks like allocating money to big government projects so that you can give other
Creating jobs, improving economy, depending whom you talk to and how it works, yes. Subsidies for different industries. So that brings another point. Another big area how government uses money is to encourage or discourage certain behavior, economic and social. whether you realize it or not. Did you realize it? So for example, you talked about subsidies, right? If we want certain industries to grow, like solar panels, we'll give them subsidies, right? Or farmers, right? I mean, our farmers can't exist without subsidies. If there were no subsidies, there would be no farming in this country altogether, right? So very true, very true. And speaking of encouraging, discouraging certain behavior, like social behavior.
There's a high tax on cigarettes.
High tax on cigarettes, exactly. We're going to tax you till you just quit smoking. Right? Or gasoline tax, right? If you drive, we don't want you to drive a car. Okay? Very good, very good. There's another major way how government uses taxes.
Sanitation.
Well, yeah, that's example of expenditure, but yes.
Tax incentives.
Tax,
Amazon to build its headquarters.
yeah, again, encouraging, discouraging certain behavior, very true. But let me tell you something. One of the biggest ways how government historically used also tax system is to put criminals in prison. You see, when you kill somebody or rob a bank, you know what I'm talking about, right? It's very difficult to prove the actual crime. But it's much easier to come and say, hey, how you doing? Nice Mercedes. Where did you get the money? Oh, you don't remember? Well, guess what? Too bad. It means you didn't report income because the burden, as we will study, is on taxpayers to prove, to show. In fact, one of the biggest criminals that ever existed in this country went to jail not because he killed hundreds or thousands of people, but because of taxes. Anybody knows the name?
Al Capone.
Al Capone. And oddly enough, there's a museum of Al Capone in Chicago. I still can't believe it. You know, we have a museum of the biggest gangster. But yeah, you know, they couldn't put him to prison because there was no evidence, and anybody who would testify or want to testify would get killed next day. But they got him on tax evasion. Exactly. So government uses tax system to penalize, discourage certain behavior, including criminal behavior, right? And they're using this to negotiate a lot of other things. Like you read in newspapers right now, the two fellows from the administration who got caught with tax evasion, now the government is trying to make a deal with them, so if they talk, they get less years, right? So very interesting stuff. Okay? So these are different ways the government uses a tax system. And this is just samples. And by the way, originally, when the whole thing started, we said, at first, the government needed money to fight wars, right? So how do we collect money from people? How do we collect money from people? Okay, we need money to fight a war. How do we go about it? Imagine you are the think tank of the original government, and you got to take money from people. How do you do that? We got to take money, but what are we taking it from? So, yes?
I was going to say, are you asking us or was that an introduction?
Well, you're already talking, so might as well.
I was going to say, so you tax consumption, whatever someone wants.
Yeah, so you figure out we got to tax something. What do you start with? So I talked about this course is about income tax, right? So you come to people, say, hey, how you doing? How much did you make last year? Oh, just curious. Oh, $10,000? Nice. You know, we could use 15% because we're going to protect you. I'm not talking about mobsters on the street. I'm talking about the government fighting wars, right? So you collected money, but then you need more money. So how do you get more money? You increase the rate. Exactly. So you go back and say, hey, how you doing? Still good? Well, remember 15%, forget it. It's 40%. Thank you. In fact, During the World War I and II, do anyone remembers what the tax rate was? It was over 90%. Over 90%. Can you believe it? You made $100, you come home, $3. Nice. Next day, it's like, I'm just going to stay in bed. What's the point? You know? So once you get to 90 or some other crazy number, you can't raise the rate anymore, right? But you need more money, so what do? Well, before you borrow, you say, we got to tax something else. You come to people and say, how are you doing? They're like, no. You can't tax my income anymore because we don't have any more money left. Interesting. Do you eat? Yeah. Okay. Welcome to consumption tax, sales tax, right? You go spend money, you figure it means you have money, right? Sales tax, it's type of consumption tax. Gasoline tax, type of consumption tax. Hold on. Okay? So people like, okay, you're taxing us on income, you're taxing us when we go buy something, we don't have anything left, nothing. Oh, where do you live, by the way? Oh, nice house, nice land. Welcome to what? Property tax. So another different type of tax called property tax. You know, whatever the value is, and you apply a certain percentage. But guess what? The government needed even more money. So what do? You go back to people. And they see you before you even say, hey, they start freaking out, and they do what? They have a heart attack and they die. And you say, nice! Because now we could have death tax. Did you hear about death tax? No? Are you serious? So, death tax is the tax assessed when the person dies. It's also known as estate tax. Estate is a fancy term which the government created to say, look, when you die, whatever you own, we're going to call it estate because we're going to pretend you're still alive. And we're going to tax it again. You know how high estate tax gets? 40, 50%, depending on the situation. It's crazy. Right? So then welcome to the world of estate tax. And you're not there to argue anymore. Now, those who were alive saying, oh my God, so I work, I made $100, I pay half of it, let's say, in income tax, I have $50 left, and then I die and I pay taxes again. Isn't that double taxation? Welcome to the world of double taxation, in case you didn't know what it was. When the same income taxed multiple times at different levels. And then whatever's left, you go spend money in the store. Again. And if you made money through an entity called corporation, there's corporate tax before you get to personal tax. It's crazy. So some people got smart. At first they thought they will fool the government by dying, so they don't pay taxes, but the government figured out that's not going to work, and they created death tax. But then people came up with a genius idea. If you don't want to get taxed when you die, so you don't have any estate, what do? Well, if you sell a house, you still get money, so it's still your asset, still part of your estate. Shh. Exactly. You transfer, and when you give something away, we call it what? Gift. Say, government, you're not going to get me. I'm going to, whatever I have before I die, I'm going to give everything away. Children love that, right? All of a sudden, family bond became stronger. You did have to bring that glass of water to your dying parents because they could disinherit you and all that other stuff. So government woke up to this and said, they're dying broke. What can we do about it? Well, what are they doing? Well, they're making gifts. Okay. Gift tax. In fact, the system is called now unified system, estate and gift tax. Government doesn't care. You're going to pass money when you die, when you're alive. We're still going to get our share. I got to be more careful the way I teach taxes because now that all these things are online, my friends at the IRS may not be too happy. Speaking of friends at the IRS, when I run conferences, I invite always IRS speakers, and some of my adjunct professors that teach in tax programs are from IRS. So another benefit that you get from being my student, you know this. You know what that means, right? That means when you are in elevator, just think before you say things. No, I'm kidding. I'm not. Remember that this reminds me episode from my big fat Greek wedding. Those two brothers. We're gonna kill you. No, I'm kidding. Okay. Anyway, so all these different taxes, right? So, good news. Are you ready for some good news? The good news is you don't have to know them. Because we're going to cover here only one type of tax once again, and that is income tax. And not just income tax, because we have federal government, then we have states, then we have cities, municipalities, and everybody has to get paid. And the mayor, that's New York City, has to get paid, right? And your federal official has to get paid, that's federal, and their state senator has to get paid. So same type of taxes pretty much are imposed by different levels of government, right? So we're not going to study any of that, and that's the good news. I just wanted to show you all these different types of taxes because when you ask me a question, Professor, is this taxable? That's a silly question, right? Which taxes are you talking about? It may not be taxable by federal income tax, but it may be taxable by state income tax, for example. Or gifts that you receive, as we'll study. Are they taxable? What's the good answer when you don't know what you're talking about? It depends. Gifts that you receive, did you know you could get $1 billion in gifts and never pay a penny in taxes? Did you know that? That's very true. Because gifts are not taxable. But the person who makes a gift, remember? Who dies or makes a gift, that's the person who gets taxed gift tax rate, not the recipient. So it's a question is which type of tax are we talking about and who are we talking about? So the question, are gifts taxable, makes no sense. Do you understand what I'm saying? All right. So, with that in mind, just to give you a bit of a history, so in this beautiful country, when tax was enacted, first pronouncement was just a piece of paper and they would circulate around, and then they decided to tax something else, somehow else. There's another piece of paper floating. And only a long while later, they compiled and they created Internal Revenue Code, actually in 1939, okay? There's a lot of arguments. Does the government have a right to tax? Is it legal? You still have online all these groups saying tax is illegal, it's never part of Constitution. That's nonsense. Okay? It was ratified in the 16th Amendment, but whatever it is, it's irrelevant. You don't pay taxes, you go to prison. So it doesn't pay to play. Okay? And it's been getting more and more complicated. So now we have 2 volumes of Internal Revenue Code. This is one of the volumes. Oh God, yeah. This is like self-defense mechanism, you know? You could kill somebody with this. This is just one volume. There's another volume of all the tax laws. And you read them and you have no clue what it's saying. So the government issued regulations, and it's like 12 books like this that tell you what this book says. And then you read regulations and you're still confused. So what do? You take a position in your tax return, the government doesn't agree. What happens in this country when people don't agree? Audit. Well, they audit you, they tell you should have paid more, you say no, I shouldn't have because that's what the law says. So there is disagreement. Ultimately what happens? You go to court, right? Why do you think we have so many lawyers? We go to court. So after the code and all those regulations, then there are stores and stores and stores and floors and floors and floors of the library filled with court cases interpreting the regulations which interpret the code. It's crazy. Nowadays it's easier because you could do online research, but still, it was nuts. Now you're beginning to appreciate why this is such interesting area and quite lucrative for those who are there. Because these days there is no even expert, there is no tax expert. There's expert in certain field of taxation. You understand? It's like doctors, they also specialize. There's a doctor who specializes in right ear and another one in left ear. No, usually they do both. All right, but you know what I'm saying. Okay? Now, speaking of courts and so on and so forth, so first of all, let's just get down some other basics. Who writes laws, tax laws in this country? Who has the authority over writing laws? Yes, sir. Congress, exactly. Exactly. Congress writes laws of this country. Everybody understands it? All right? So now you understand why the system is so messed up, right? Why? Because when Congress writes laws, who are congressional people? Who are these people? Politicians. How do you become a politician? Be careful what you say, it's being recorded. You're being elected, right? But if you want to get elected next time, what do you have to do? Politicians don't pay. They get paid. They don't make enough money generally to pay. But the bottom line is you got to make your constituents happy, right? How do you make your constituents happy? You try to accommodate their needs. So there are all these exceptions to the rules for certain groups of people. Oh, I have a lot of farmers, let's do this. Oh, I have this industry that's supporting me, let's do this exception, okay? So that's why it's so crazy. I'll tell you, code is really a political process. That's all it is. It's pure politics. Yeah, we need to raise money, but how do we raise money? From whom? It's major. Of course, economics have to be there, otherwise the country is going to be destroyed completely, right? But ultimately, it's a political process. Because, depending where you are, you have certain beliefs and all that other good stuff, okay? Major part. All right. So Congress has ultimate authority and writes the laws, but Congress, these guys are busy or not busy, so they delegate their responsibilities here. Anybody knows who's in charge of monetary things in this country? Exactly, United States Treasury Department. So that's the entity that Congress created to deal with the Treasury, and everything has to do with printing the money, interest rates, and all the other good stuff, right? But Treasury Department also very busy because, to go out, collect taxes. So they created what? IRS. Internal Revenue Code. Excuse me. Internal Revenue Service. Okay? And IRS is charged with basically administering, enforcing tax laws and collecting taxes. Okay? You got it? If there is a disagreement between taxpayer and the system, then you take it to court, and court cannot decide basically what the law is, they just interpret the law. And if the interpretation is not to the government's liking, the government could always change the law to clarify it better. Okay? So this brings us to the next question. How does the government make sure, how does IRS make sure that you pay your taxes? Good question, isn't it? Any thoughts? This is interesting stuff. That is good to know. Yes? Okay, so first of all, I heard, don't they send you 1099 forms? So first of all, let's be clear. The whole system of taxation is called voluntary system of taxation. Why is it voluntary? Why is it called voluntary? Because you are supposed to, at the end of the year, mail the check to the government, right? Or transfer money to the government, right? The truth of the matter is there is nothing voluntary about it, right? Because if you don't do it, you're going to be in trouble, first of all. Number one. And number two, does the government really trust you to make sure you pay all you have to? Not really. They don't trust you. Just like they don't trust themselves. So what does the government do in order to make sure you pay taxes? And just think about it logically. What would you do, when somebody gets the money, what is the best way to make sure you get the tax? They get the money before you even get your money, right? So if you work for somebody, if you have an employer, they tell employer, they have a law that says, hey, before you send out money to your employees, you got to send us our cut. You understand? And if you don't do it, you're in trouble. So that's where this big shocker comes in when you see a check. Oh, what happened? What happened? Taxes happened. Okay? And many other things. Is it hot or is it me?
Yeah, they raised the temperature to save energy or something.
They saved temperature to raise energy. I was always freezing in this room. Wow, now it's very hot. Bedtiming. Okay. So, although it's a little bit cooler today, right? So, number one, what the government does is they actually get your money before you get it. Okay? And if you don't work for anybody, they require you, if you're self-employed, if you have your own business, to file tax returns on your own and pay taxes, but they're going to wait till the end of the year because you could make the money, blow it away, spend it all, you're going to have no money to pay. So they require you to make payments quarterly, right? If you didn't know, every quarter you're supposed to pay. But at the end of the day, when is your tax return due for individuals generally? I hear April 15th. You're right. Technically, the law says it's not April 15th, it's 15th day, January, February, March, April of the fourth month of the year. That you pick, because it doesn't have to be calendar year. You could make your taxable year from October to October, for example. Generally, people pick calendar year. So generally, it's April 15th, okay? And if it falls on a weekend, then it's next business day. So this is when your tax return is due. What is tax return? It's a piece of paper where you put down your information, what you made, what government allows you not to pay taxes on, what the government allows you deduction for, at the end of the day, how much you owe. This is what tax return is. That's all it is. And if you're married, you put information for you and your spouse on one piece of paper. Or one form with multiple pieces of paper. And if you're married and you love each other, no, there is no separate provision there. But it's possible to be married and filing separate returns where you don't, there's a question whether you love each other or how much. We'll talk about that in the next few classes. Okay? Yes?
I heard that on tax returns there's a section for illegal activities.
Yeah.
What's the point of that?
Great. See, you're going to be very excited. The question is, the question is that you saw or you heard?
I heard.
You heard. So the question is, I heard there is a section on the tax return for illegal activities. Okay. To put it differently, for now, you are supposed to put in your tax return income you received from illegal activities. And that begs a lot of questions, right? So the good news is I'm going to allocate a class to illegal businesses and how they're being taxed. Until that time, I'll keep you puzzled on questions like, who in the world would report that? And why? And how? And these are very interesting questions. You know, if I taught somewhere else, I wouldn't cover it, but since we're in New York City, I think discussing illegal activities are very important. Because this way, next time you walk by Times Square or West Village and somebody comes to you, smoke, 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 you could say, do you know it's taxable? And immediately give few tax advices. Okay? On deductibility of few business expenses. All right? So we'll talk about that all in due time. In fact, this brings me to a big point because a lot of things that I'll touch upon we can't cover immediately. So I'll ask you to be patient, like in that teaching, patience. And this brings me to the next point, also in the big picture level. I will use terminology that you have no clue what it means. And some things that we'll discuss are going to look very blurry, like not clear. This is like education by submersion. It's like when you go to a different country, they all speak different language and you have no clue what they're talking about. Or, different example, when you go to the bar, it's very loud music, people talking to you and knocking, but you have no idea what they're talking about. Maybe that's easier to understand. So, my point is, it's okay. At the beginning, things are going to be blurry. We're going to look at things from the bird's eye view. And then with each class, we're going to zoom in on each and every topic and each and every proposition. At the beginning, we're going to pretend that we understand certain concepts, like income. Like I talk about income with deductions, right? You think you understand, but you really have no clue. I still have no clue. No, kind of. Maybe I have some clue. But we're going to zoom in, so don't worry. Okay, just stay with me. This is how this topic is taught all over the country. Not as well, of course, but kind of. Okay? So, the email where you will be sending your homework to is assignments3300@gmail.com. There should be, or maybe not. Yeah, I got your sign-up sheets, which is beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So let's sit down, settle down, and we shall continue. But before we do continue, I know what you're sitting and thinking about, because I could read your mind. And I could even tell you what you're sitting and thinking about. Would you like me to do that? What you're sitting and thinking about is, I don't understand. I've been in this class for 2 hours something, and he still did not assign any homework. Am I right or am I right? So, please write down homework for next class. Read chapter 3. And generally, as outline states, please be one chapter ahead from where we are. You want to be ahead, because I'll take time, but if everything goes well, and I see based on the feedback and everything else that things are going smoothly, we're going to move on. And and if you have read the material, you'll be just much better situation. So, homework for next class. Besides reading chapter 3, to make sure you read chapter 3, problems from chapter 3, number 24, 25, 26, 27, 29. Remember, it's for 2 classes, right? And 30. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's do 32 too. Okay? 32. 30 and 32. Okay? Now, this is due in my email box before the next class, which is 11 a.m. next Friday, whatever the date is. What is it, September 7th? Okay? So it's okay to send before, but don't send late, because that's late. Boy, it's hot in here. And also, next class, listen up. Next class, we're meeting here, okay? Because I want to set you up some more live so you feel the energy, which will last you for a long time. Now, Gentleman came to me during the break and asked me a question, and I said I'll answer it during the class. Could you remind me what the question was? Whoever you are, yes. Oh, yes. So in terms of grading for the course, I guess that's back to housekeeping stuff. Basically, I assign the grade not based on how you did in the class, but more about personality. No. The grade assigned not how you did in class, but how you did relative to how the class did. Right? So you could call it curving. In other words, if the highest grade on the exam was 70, that's going to be an A. Okay? Now, with that in mind, registrar office has their own guidelines, right? What the grade should be. So it will never be lower than what, in other words, there is no down curving from the registered guidelines, okay? So I wouldn't worry about things, especially there are some situations, oh, we didn't discuss, I don't know, there wasn't a homework. You're all in the same situations, and including homework. Nobody's exposed to lecture before I assign homework. So it's a matter of how you do relative to how the class does. And same comes to exams and everything else. I'll remind you, please don't eat once the lecture starts. Please put away all the food so no noises are made, and so on and so forth. If you missed the beginning of the class, you could sit in the back, eat all you want, leave me a few pieces, and enjoy yourself. Okay, so that's the homework for next class. And again, we're meeting here next week unless you see other notice. If, for example, I get stuck and I cannot fly back for some reason, I'll notify you, in which case we'll communicate online. But given everything else going to be fine, we're meeting here next week on Friday. Okay, so let's continue our conversation about IRS, right? Do you want to talk more about IRS and how they check you to make sure you pay taxes? Anybody curious? You better be curious, because you don't want to find out another way. Okay? All right. So the question is, how does the government make sure you pay taxes? Well, one thing we already said, they don't trust you, right? So they make sure they collect money before you even see the money. Another way, they make other people work with them and notify them how much you're making in case you lie to them on your return. How does the government do that? So for example, your employer, when they pay you, the employer is supposed to send a form to IRS showing exactly how much you made, right? How does that form called? We don't care. For those curious minds, W-2. Okay? If you work for somebody else as independent contractor, your own business, businesses are required by law when they pay you over a certain amount to file a form that somebody brought up before called 1099. Why is it called 1099? Anybody wants to guess? I have no clue myself. Okay, it's called 1099. Okay, there are other forms, 1098, which is the bank sends the form for how much interest and dividends you received. All geared towards the same thing. So the government knows, to the extent possible, what you're making. And what do they do with all that information? They upload it into their big computer. Okay? And then they do crazy stuff, like matching. So you file your return showing you made $30,000, and there's a form, 1099 form from different businesses showing that they paid you $200,000. Mismatch, red flag. Letter goes out, or maybe a phone call. Hey, how you doing? Okay? And that's, by the way, how government goes about making sure you pay taxes, because they check. And this is one way they check. They compare information. Okay? Any other way the government checks to make sure? They audit. Right? Audit means check, right? So they select, how to select people? Well, one way, what you just said, is randomly, right? Because, you want to random selection, hopefully it will be representative of the population. By the way, statistically, do you know what percentage of tax returns actually get audited? Anybody? It's crazy low. It's about 1%. It varies from year to year, but it's about 1%. So sometimes people call it audit roulette. In other words, you bet that you're not going to get audited and you're going to lie. The problem is if you lie on your return, we said there's serious consequences, number one. And number two, I have bad news for you. Would you like to hear bad news? You're in deep trouble. Because number one, if you commit fraud, whoever makes noises in this area, please stop. I'm very sensitive. I could hear anything and everything, especially with those wrappings of the pretzels, because that's what I'm thinking about right now. So you're in deep trouble. Why? Because they caught you for not paying taxes. You see, unlike other people, you cannot say, oh, I didn't know, because you already took tax course, and they're going to know about it. And your troubles are even deeper when they're going to look at your transcript. You were sitting in Professor Melnick's course, and you did this? They're going to put you away for much longer. So now, the truth of the matter is, ignorance is never a defense, right? I don't know if have you heard this expression? So in court, saying, oh, I didn't know, the judge will say, well, now you will know for next time, okay? Because sometimes I deal with these situations, but that's a separate conversation. Okay, so they check you, they audit you randomly, and that also serves as a nice example to everybody else. Like all of a sudden your neighbor gets audited, and that's when you wake up and say, honey, did we do everything right? Right? They audit you randomly. They audit you based on mismatches. They audit you based on also certain parameters. For example, you're in certain business, or you live in certain area, or you live in certain state, but all of a sudden your expenses of certain type are 2-3 times than the median of other people in your area. Something's funky. Okay? Once again, they may audit you, right? Audit means simply sending a letter for you to respond with some additional information, okay? Or a field audit when they come to you, which you don't want, okay? Although these are very nice guys, quite often. So, okay, now, how else does the government find out if you didn't pay enough taxes? Audit, matching, how else? Somebody calls and tells you have no idea how right you are. In fact, the biggest underpayments that the government learns about exactly through this area. Somebody called, and they encourage this. They give awards. You get a percentage fee of what the government collects. I had an adjunct that I hired a few years ago after he was fired from a major company for reporting to the IRS about $100 million underpayment. They fired him immediately, but he didn't care. He was already a multimillionaire, thanks to the IRS and the finder's fee. Okay? But it's worth a separate conversation. The government learns from other people. Guess the top 3 categories of people the government learns about the underpayments. Number 1, number 2, number 3. Anybody? Yeah. Yeah, they're all whistleblowers, you're right. And that's, by the way, the technical term of the statute. But give me, because don't you want to know who's going to call on you? Do you want to know? All right, so number 1, not accountants. That would have to be like one really dumb accountant. Because that accountant immediately loses his entire business, right? Because any other client learns accountant called on them, done. So, not accountants. Anybody else? Yes. Employees, exactly the example I just gave. So employees, disgruntled employees, unhappy employees, right? One reason your employer will keep you very happy, because you may know too much. Another reason for those of you who are entrepreneurial, to be very nice to your employees. All right? So that's actually category number 3. Guess who category number 2 is? Clients may not know, and they may know, you're right, and it doesn't mean they don't report, but the top 3, competitors, possibly, Possibly, yes. Not top 3. Guys, have you learned your 10 commandments? No? Be nice to thy neighbor. Why do you think it's there? Because your neighbors are your biggest reporters. You know, I remember when I just got married and we moved in this apartment in Brooklyn, and one day I walked out in the hallway waiting for elevator, and my neighbor came out and said, I had no idea you're involved in so many businesses. And her room was close to our bedroom, so I didn't even start talking to her about anything else at that point. So, number one, reporter, number one, life and death situation for many of you. Number one, who's going to report on you? Yes, but not spouse. Ex-spouse. An ex-girlfriend. Okay? So remember they told you getting married one of the biggest decisions you'll ever make? Now you understand why. Because when you're going to get divorced, why? What? You know you're going to get divorced, right? Vast majority of you. You didn't know that? I'm sorry. Statistically speaking, majority of people are going to get divorced. And then they're not going to learn the lesson. They're going to get married again. And then 80% of those are going to get divorced again. Because it's always about, well, it's their fault. Okay? That's a separate conversation also. So, yes, your spouse is your girlfriend. So, you know, word to the wise, you know, keep confidential information confidential in case you get divorced. Never hurts. Okay? You'll remember my words very well when time comes. Because time will come. All right, so now that nobody gets married at this point in this class, we're continuing conversation. By the way, speaking of getting married, one of the things that you'll learn about this class and the way I teach this class, in case you didn't realize yet, I run it, I mean, there's certain stuff we have to cover, but I run it through life. And as we go through life, different life events, I teach you the tax consequences of that. So we're going to talk about, for example, how to get married. You think you know how to get married. You don't. And you're already getting hints on that. Or even how to propose, those of you who haven't heard from other students. So that brings me, or how to get, well, when to have kids, not how. Okay? Because that makes a big difference as you'll learn next class when you have kids. I learned it. By the 3rd kid, I was perfect. It's true. We'll talk about it. Okay? So my advice to you guys, put your personal lives on hold until semester is over. You'll thank me later. I see some faces already. Oh, damn it, I already got engaged. It's okay, I'll teach you how to get disengaged. And we'll talk about divorces too and how to prepare for those. All right? And I'm not kidding. That's right. Okay. So, what were we talking about again? IRS. Okay. So now, IRS audits you, and you owe money, right? So first of all, how do they audit you? We said we send a letter, right? They send a letter, or they may show up, or they may call you sometimes, okay? So how long can IRS go after you? Let's talk about the topic called statute of limitations, if those of you who want to be fancy, okay? That means the timeline, the period of time which the government has to go after you, because it's not unlimited, right? So what is the general rule? 3 years I hear. Anybody more? 20 I hear. Anybody more? Excellent. So the answer is correct. As a general rule, please write down, it's 3 years. Okay? 3 years after what? 3 years after the time your tax return was filed or should have been filed, whichever is later. I'll repeat again. It's 3 years from the time your tax return was filed or should have been filed, whichever is later. So if you filed earlier than you were supposed to, let's say April 15th deadline, you filed in January, 3 years is going to go from which? From April, the later one, right? If you were supposed to file tax return in April 15th, but you didn't, can you file a return later? Yeah. You ask for what? Extension. And they give it to you automatically for 6 months. And then if you need more, then you have to give a real story there. So if you file, let's say, in September, then it's 3 years from September, whichever is later. You understand? By the way, you can file your tax return later. Can you pay your taxes later? No. And if you pay them later, guess what happens? Penalties and interest. Guys, like, don't you ever do this again. Okay? What happens if you file early and overpay? Do you get interest from the government? It's one-way conversation. Okay? So those people who say, I have terrific accountant, I'm getting amazing tax return every year, like $5,000. Economically, that's a stupid thing to do because you're giving the government interest-free loan. You better keep this money in somewhere, right? Now, for some people, that's the only way to save for vacation, right? So they overpay the whole year, then you get a refund, and now we're going to Disney World, okay? So sometimes when I get these interviews on tax time from Wall Street Journal, NBC, they're saying, so is it good or bad to receive a refund? What's my answer? It depends. Ask me more. What does it depend on? Okay? But you guys know. So a general rule is 3 years. Now, 3 years, that's the general rule. If you omit more than 20% of your adjusted gross income, is it 20 or 25%? 25% of your adjusted gross income, and we don't know what the term means, adjusted gross income. Adjusted gross income means gross income but adjusted, okay? And we'll talk about it next class, what exactly it means. For now, pretend you understand, just like in that noisy bar, okay? But if you omit substantial amount, what substantial amount? More than 25% of adjusted gross income, the government could go after you for how long now? Double, that's the way to remember, 6 years, okay? Now, when I say omit, you know what I mean by omit? It's like, oops, I forgot. Right? Omit means, if you look at definition, it says, oops, I forgot. Okay? Versus what? You know, they call you, say, oops, I forgot, oops, I did it again. But if this happens again and again, and you intentionally did not report certain income, the government can go after you for how long? Answer. Forever. They could go after you forever. Forever, ever? Yes, forever, ever. Okay? Not only that, if you never file your tax return, the statute of limitation never starts. So once again, they could go after you forever. Now I see a lot of disappointed faces. People texting, file return urgently. Okay? Now, it could work the other way around too, by the way. So, with statute of limitation, the government calls you 7 years later, okay? Or 4 years later without a mission. Hey, how you doing? You just hang up. You don't have to talk to them. You don't have to because statute of limitation is over. Goodbye. Okay? But it also works the other way around too. If you file your tax return and you overpaid You made a mistake. How do you get the money back? You get a refund, right, if you overpay taxes. But if you made a mistake, for example, in return, you need to, it's called file amended return. All it is just same return, just with corrections. We're going to keep it simple for now, right? But you also have statute of limitations. Okay, for you to ask for money back from the government gives you 3 years, same 3 years, time you filed return, should have filed, or 2 years from the time taxes were paid, whichever is later, because maybe you filed return on April 15th, but you didn't have any money to pay taxes. And you actually paid taxes, I don't know, 5 years later. So you have 2 years after that 5-year filing. You understand? And if you call them later, they're going to hang up on you. They don't have to give you money back if you blew your statute of limitations. Okay? Any questions on this? You know, sometimes I get a question, Professor, so the government allows you to file a tax return later. Why would you, what are the situations? Well, is it possible you didn't have time to prepare a tax return? Yeah. Okay, but if you don't have time to prepare a tax return, it means you didn't prepare a tax return. It means you really don't know how much you owe, right? Right. But then they require you to pay taxes anyway, right? Right. So how do you know how much you have to pay? You don't know. So how much should you pay? You estimate. You don't know. But if you underpay, you're going to be subject to interest and penalties. You understand?
So it's 3 years after you pay the taxes and 2 years after the return is filed?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
So what are the two situations whereby IRS can go after you for error?
If you lie on your tax return, if you commit fraud, which means intentionally put wrong stuff or don't put stuff on your tax return. And if you never file a tax return, they could go after you forever. Okay? All right. Excellent. Excellent, ladies and gentlemen. We're doing phenomenally well. So, we have little time, and the little time that we have, by the way, once again, I hope you all copied the homework email address. This is where you're going to be sending your homework, not to my email address, okay? So, I just want to give you some, I want to give you a preview of how this course is going to go and the topics and how the whole thing works from the big picture perspective still. So in your book, if you look at your chapter 3, and we are in chapter 3 in case you didn't know, and we are in tax 3300 in case you didn't know. This is the tax formula. This is what we're going to do entire semester. We're going to go through this formula line by line and discuss things that fall into different places. And I'd like to walk you through this formula today, so you have kind of broad picture. Okay? We'll first talk in general terms, and then each chapter will zoom in, just like it says, on different items. Okay? So first of all, how do we tax? Where do we start? Okay? What is taxable? What is taxable? What is taxable? The answer is everything. And there is so much truth to this because the way Internal Revenue Code is designed and drafted, whenever in doubt, it's taxable. Government does not have to list, oh, this type of income is taxable. No. If you read the code, it says income is taxable from whatever source derived. So everything is taxable unless the government says the specific item is not taxable. Now, this is going to be very different when we talk about deductions, which are things that decrease taxable income. Because there, when I ask you a question, what is deductible? The answer is going to be what? Guess. Nothing. You're absolutely correct. Nothing is deductible. Whenever in doubt, it's not deductible. The law says nothing is deductible unless the government lists specific item that says this item you could deduct. Do you see a huge difference? You'll get to appreciate it more and more as we go. Okay? So, we start, it's called income broadly conceived. Okay? And this is the first item where we start. It's a funnel. And this is the widest point of the funnel. And as this funnel goes, it's going to get more, narrow, smaller. And that ultimately, the bottom line, you heard the expression bottom line? Guess where it came from? I don't know where it came from. But this is the bottom line right here. Okay? Which says taxes due, how much you're going to pay, and it's calculated based on this line, which is called taxable income. Because what you're going to learn, whatever you make, all that, or some of it, may not be taxable. And even if it is taxable, it may get smaller by some deductions or credits or whatever it is. So we're starting wide, and we're going to get it more and more narrow to get to taxable income. And that's the amount that's going to be taxed. Okay? Everyone with me? Beautiful. On the big picture point, I just want to say something else to make sure you guys appreciate also another big picture. So this item, what's actually taxed, called taxable income, right? We call it, technically speaking, tax base. Okay? This is what's being taxed. You understand? What is it that we are going to apply what? Rate to, right? Percentage. And this is tax collected. Okay? So the formula is actually very simple. Of all the tax systems that exist, we got to figure out what it is that we're taxing, which is the most important point. Why do you think there was a song made about it? You heard the song about tax base? Where it says it's all about the base? Because it's all about the base. I see some face like, I can't believe he's going there. Yeah, because some presidential nominees say, what? Oh, let's simplify a system. Let's just not tax anything. Or let's tax everything. Or gifts, let's exclude them from tax base for gift tax purposes. So how can you vary what you're collecting? How much money you have? There's only two things you could play with. Just like the exercise we did at the beginning of class. You could increase the rate, how much you're charging, or you could change the tax base, what it is that you're taxing. You understand? These are the only two variables. So tax base could be federal income tax, like we said. Tax base could be gift taxes, gifts that you make. Tax base could be property value. Tax base could be what you're selling, what you're buying, and so on and so forth. And within each base, you could increase it or decrease it. You understand? So for example, one of the changes in law this year that becomes effective, that's interesting by the way. Here's another piece of advice for some of you, especially those of you who are planning to get divorced, who are married already. Serious stuff. Listen carefully. Most of the people have no clue about it. So the new law, the current law allows when you pay alimonies, you know what alimonies are? Anybody knows the definition of alimonies? It's basically the price for saying I do. No. It's basically when you get divorced, it's the payment to support your ex-spouse, right? So as of now, when you pay them, it's deductible on your tax return, which means you pay less taxes. And the person who receives them, they don't pay taxes on it. Excuse me, they pay taxes on it under the current law. So it's taxable for the person who receives it, not the person who pays it. Everybody understands? For divorce agreements, after December 31st of this year, alimony payments will no longer be deductible. So, what's the lesson here? When I was in the radio program, and they asked me, what's the biggest advice you could give to people? Get divorced quickly this year, because the alimony payment, if you're the one paying alimonies, you're gonna be getting deductions.
But for the next year, you're not going to get.
Well, we'll talk about what happens next year. We'll have a detailed conversation about it. Okay? Anyway. So, let's get back to the conversation. So we start income broadly conceived. It's whatever it is that you receive during the year, okay? Everything. Got it? Everything. Gross receipts, whatever comes your way. You got it? Except 2 items. It's everything except 2 items. Number 1, borrowed money. Okay? Borrowed money. So when you borrow money, is that your income? No. From accounting perspective, does it increase your equity? What is the tax? This is not accounting course, but I'll throw you out from here. If you don't know your basic accounting. When you borrow money, you debit what? Cash. You credit what? Liability. There's no change in equity. There's no income, right? Oh, I see like some smiles here. Finally, we're talking about accounting. Nice. Oh, thank you, God. Okay. I just want to give you a little break, emotional break. Now we'll come back to taxes. All right. So one item is excluded is borrowed money, and the other one we call return of capital. That means when you get your own money back. So for example, if you lend somebody money last year, now this year they pay you your own money back, is that income to you? No. So it doesn't even get into income broadly conceived. Do you understand? Now, interest that you may make on that's a separate conversation. That's going to be taxable. But the principal, what you lend and now get back, it's not taxable. Any questions? Perfect. Next item is called exclusions. Write down. Exclusions are type of income which the government does not tax. So, what's the perfect example of exclusion? And there are plenty of them in your textbook. Certain veteran benefits, but on the basic level today we talked about gifts. When you get a gift, even if it's $1 billion, guess what? It's exclusion. It's excludable from this formula, which means you will never ever pay taxes on it. Income taxes on it. Okay? Is that clear? In fact, if you're curious, you could take a look in your Exhibit 3-1 for examples of exclusions. Okay? So bequests. What are bequests? When somebody dies and leaves you something in their will or trust, that's a bequest. It's also not subject to income tax. Did you know that? To you, recipient. Okay? Child support payments. When you get child support payments, that's not your income. You exclude it. Damages for sickness. I'm going to teach you how to sue people, and then when you get money not to pay taxes, how to structure it. Gifts received right here. So on and so forth. Okay? So these are examples of exclusion. So we start wide. We take out 2 items that are not even broadly conceived income. Then we take out things that, due to policy reason, the government said we are not taxing. It could change, but for now they're exclusions. So that's the example we just went through, including gifts, including inheritances, including compensation for physical injuries, and so on and so forth. Okay? And we get to the line item called gross income. Okay? And there's nothing gross about it. That's how we decided to call it. Okay? But it's an important item. Why? Because, first of all, gross income is what basically end up having what's normally being taxed, which is your salaries, your interest, your dividends, your embezzlements, your theft, whatever you stole is still taxable income, your illegal income, your bonuses, your royalties, and so on and so forth. Okay? So up to the line item gross income, this is what's coming your way. You understand? And we either include it in the funnel or we keep it out. Now, what happens after this line item is completely different ball game. Because after this line item, we're entering into the world of deductions, exactly. And deductions are expenditures. It's the money you spend, not get, but spend during the year. You understand? And which expenditures get into the tax formula, meaning government allows you deduction for, meaning used to offset against income, so you pay less taxes. First of all, our expenses that show up here, are they good? Is it a good thing or bad thing? Just think about it. If you have an expense that you could deduct in this formula, what does it do to your bottom line, to your base? Does it make it bigger or smaller? Smaller. So it's good, right? Because you pay less taxes. So you say, oh, thank you, government, thank you for allowing me this expense, okay? Because the government says, no, nothing is deductible unless it's this or this or this or this. You understand? And there are two types of expense deductions. One is called deduction for adjusted gross income, because these are the deductions we use to arrive at the next line item, which is adjusted gross income. And there is another set of expenses, we call them itemized deductions. These are deductions from adjusted gross income. Sometimes these expenses are also referred to as above the line and below the line deductions. The line being AGI, adjusted gross income. And AGI is second most important line item in the tax formula because a lot of financial institutions use it to determine if they should give you a loan, if they should give you a credit card. It's an important item. So we got above the line deductions and below the line deductions. You understand? And there are different types. So above the line deductions, our examples would be, let's say, trade or business expenses. We're going to talk about trade or business. What expense is deductible? Anybody thinking of starting their own business at some point? Please raise your hands. Okay, so we'll talk about a lot of good stuff. How to investigate business, deduct the most, because otherwise it may not be deductible. What expenses are deductible, how to plan, and so on and so forth. We'll talk about that. Okay? As of now, alimony is also above the line deduction. Okay? For this year, for those who are paying it, pursuant to agreement. Contribution to retirement fund, IRA. You know, if you set money aside, government allows you deduction. Why do they allow you deduction? To encourage you to save for retirement. Why would they want to do that? Exactly. If you don't do it, they'll have to support you. It's all policy. Okay? Now, below the line deduction, that's where a lot of magic happened this year with tax law change, because the itemized deductions, it's actually very interesting. Because if you look at the itemized deductions, and by the way, why are they called itemized?
Item by item.
Exactly. Because the government actually gives you a choice. Very interesting point. The government says you can either deduct this amount in your situation, called standard deduction, for everybody in your category, or you could deduct item by item of certain expenses for which we allow deduction for. And you could pick whichever is bigger. Sweet. So, examples of itemized deductions. Exhibit 3.3, if you want to go back in your book. You see medical expenses, deductible, as long as they're above certain amount, and only that amount, the excess amount gets deducted. We'll talk about it. State and local income tax, real estate tax, property tax. This is the new law, by the way. Before, you could have deducted much more. Now, maximum $10,000. You could deduct in itemized deductions between real estate taxes, personal property, and state or local income taxes. Okay, maximum 10,000. So for whom it's a big hit immediately? Who benefits or suffers from this particular provision? Think about it.
Landlords.
People who make a lot of money. If you have a lot of real estate, right? Or you make a lot of money, you pay a lot of state and local taxes. Before you could have deducted all that stuff. Now, maximum $10,000. Okay? There's a lot of talk everywhere what the law actually does. You're going to see as we go through whom it benefits, whom it doesn't benefit, and you'll make your own decisions. Because once you actually know what you're talking about, when you look at stuff, it becomes very easy. Okay? So then you see interest on home mortgage, you see investment interest, and so on and so forth. So you itemize these items, but remember these three cannot exceed 10,000, and you compare them to what? To standard deduction. Now, what is standard deduction? Well, standard deduction varies from year to year, but here's another major change. Major change this year. Look what standard deduction was last year, for example, for single person. $6,000. Now it's what for single? $12,000. $12,000. It was $6,350, now it's $12,000. So for people who don't have any itemized deductions, let's say, and just have no mortgages, no personal, just, okay? Now they could deduct $12,000 from their income. Again, who does that benefit? And if you are married filing jointly, last year was $12,000, now it's $24,000. $24,000 standard deduction. What is the average household income in this country? Between 30,000 and 40,000? $24,000 is deductible. Whom does that benefit? There's a lot of talk. Whom this new law benefits. Okay? Figure it out. It's one of your homework problems to think about. Okay? So standard deduction, first of all, varies from year to year, and this is the major change. So what Trump did, he basically doubled standard deduction and limited the amount of itemized for those who have a lot of homes or pay a lot of taxes. Okay? So are you better off with this or not? Well, it depends on your situation, right? If you have a lot of taxes and property taxes and in total it's bigger than what you can get now, well, then you're worse off. And you could extrapolate based on different situations, okay? And as you can see, it also depends on your filing status. As you can see, there's single, there's married filing jointly, there's surviving spouse, somebody who survived the marriage until the spouse died. Okay? There is head of household also. There is married filing separately. This is like, I love you, but let's keep our stuff separately. Okay? There's also married, unmarried by dating. No such filing status. So, now, what are these filing statuses? We don't know yet. We're going to study it in detail. But for now, you could figure it out, right? You could guess, and it's good enough. Your guess for now is good enough. Okay? So you take your standard deduction. Now, interestingly enough, standard deduction is comprised of two amounts. It's comprised of basic amount, which is what we just went through, given to everybody in your category. But there is also additional amount given to people in certain categories. And the two categories are what? you're either blind or 65 or over, right? Because if you're either blind or 65 or over, look at what happens, additional amounts. 2018, you get 1,600 for each qualification. So if you're blind, you get 1,600. And if you're 70, you get additional 1,600. Do you understand? And if you're married filing jointly, you get 1,300 for each qualification. You understand? Excuse me? I'm not sure what you're implying there. But yes, if you're married and blind, because you get it for blindness, not blindly marrying somebody. Okay? My mother sometimes talks about that to me. Less and less these days, thank God. Okay, this was a big joke. Honey, I love you. And my mother loves you even more. I gotta be careful. I used to make a lot of jokes. I still do, but less about my personal life until one night I was in a restaurant with my wife, and then somebody comes up, student from a long time ago, Professor Malloy, good to see you. I'm like, hey, are you his wife? I heard so much about you. Like, please don't say another word. As the class goes by, you'll understand why. So, if you didn't yet. So next time you are on the street and you see a couple, elderly couple, 80 years old, blind, what are you thinking? If both of them 70 and blind, that's good tax savings there. Right? Because each one of them gets 1,300 two times. And it's two of them, so it's 4 times. Speaking of tax planning, right? So if you're married filing jointly, your basic amount is $24,000. And if both of you are blind and old, it's 1,300 times 4. It's crazy tax position to be in. Excuse me? Especially if your income is lower, exactly. Now, sometimes I get asked this question, why blind? What about all the other disabilities? Is it because the blind people came to the Capitol Hill and just started smacking everybody? No. But this could be something you could think about, research, if you want to make a project out of it at the end of the year. I just hope not too many people are going to go in that direction. But yeah, it's a good question. It's a good question. Is it because it's tough to fill out tax return where you don't see it? I don't know. So you could think about it. Any questions on standard deduction versus itemized? So I just want to tell you something else before you go home, because I know you don't want to go home. You don't want this to ever end, right? I just want to walk you through the formula, because after you take out standard deduction or itemize, look what happens here. Do you see the line personal and dependency exemption? Do you see this? This is the amount given to each person, about $4,000, depending on the year, because the government decided a certain amount, certain type of personal expense should not be taxed. It's just automatic deduction. Guess what? It disappeared with this act. There's no more exemption. There used to be long conversations how to calculate how many exemptions somebody gets, many mistakes in exams. It's done. There's no exemption anymore. So they increased standard deduction drastically for people, but they eliminated exemptions. Okay? So whom does that benefit or hurt? Interesting question, right? Theoretically, if you have 10 kids, you probably lost a lot, right? But then again, depending on your income, if your income was low to begin with, you don't really pay taxes anyway, as we'll study. Because vast majority of population, do you know that over 90% or 85%, whatever statistic is, of the taxes in this country are paid by the top 5% of the population? Okay. So we'll talk about it. We'll get to exemptions, because now you're going to get to the facts. You're just going to see how things play out. You'll draw your own conclusions. Okay. Because tax area is very politicized, but mainly because people just don't know what they're talking about. They just go with conversations. So for prior year, you're still going to take out exemptions, but that's disappearing. Okay? And then you get to taxable income, which is, again, our tax base. It's the amount of being taxed. Now, I just want to say, while exemption amount disappeared from tax return, you still need to know what the exemption amount is, because it's used for other purposes in the code. Like figuring out who is your dependent, what is their income, cannot exceed the amount of exemption, and so on and so forth. So you'll see in your textbook the amounts of exemptions for last year, this year, and so on and so forth. For those curious, I could just tell you, for 2018, it's $4,150, $4,150. For last year, it's $4,050. Okay? And how to determine whether somebody's your dependent for whom you used to get exemption, but now it's important for other purposes, like your filing status and so on and so forth. This is something we'll talk about next class. Any questions? Beautiful. Well, this was a joy. I look forward to seeing you next week. Meanwhile, you have your homework. Please make sure you check announcements.